Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, John Macri, fantasy analyst here at PFF, where rookie season keeps on rolling, baby. And joining me to bask in the ambiance of this year's rookie class and help me break it all down as per usual, the great Kate Magdziuk is in the house. Kate, you ready to keep this rookie hype train rolling?
I am. Today we're discussing running backs, which is one of the most interesting running backs in recent memory. Not really many complete prospects in this class. So honestly, like rookie rankings, I've seen all over the map. There really is no consensus ranking for these rookie running backs. And I think it's because there are a lot of different traits. Nobody has the complete package. So a lot of this is kind of projecting, and a lot of this is picking and choosing, kind of like build your own running back. What traits do you love in a running back? And that's kind of defining everybody's rookie ranking. So we're going to break down all these prospects, how they project to the NFL, what we like about them, what we don't. Like, this is going to be a really interesting show. I don't know how you feel about this class, but I find myself tinkering with these running backs day in and day out. And I don't really think that there's going to be a correct ranking of any of these guys, maybe until we get a landing spot.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is a running back class that, yeah, isn't getting quite the praise and the adulation of past classes, right? Where it's
Adulation.
unlikely.
That's a great word.
You like that
That's
one?
a
Oh,
great
okay.
word.
I'll use it more. But yeah, it's like we're unlikely to see anyone taken in the first round, right? And I think there are some interesting names here that we're going to talk about. So I'm definitely excited to see how you have them ranked because, like you said, I've been tinkering with where I have these guys like from top to bottom for a while now, and literally up till about like 30 minutes ago. I might still be tinkering, to be honest. So
I'm gonna be honest, so, like, it's not productive tinkering for me because I feel like depending, in this I kinda feel this way about, like, that second tier of wide receivers. Depending which way the wind is blowing, I might have some different feelings about one guy versus another, but it's not this is such a fluid situation. I do think that running back, more than probably any position that we're going to talk about, is so dependent on landing spot and potential to take over a backfield. But there are a couple guys, though maybe they didn't take over their collegiate backfields, could project as true workhorses here in the NFL with the right landing spot. So let's dive in.
yeah, you're right. It's definitely one of those things like pre-draft. There's way less consensus on this group, and then you could imagine that consensus will get a little bit better once landing spots and draft capital are sorted out, right? So yeah, we're going to get into it today. We got 8 running backs that we picked out for today's show. Again, they're probably more, but we're going to try to keep it nice and tight here pre-draft, since like we said, landing spots, draft capital going to be a big determining factor as to how these guys do in the NFL. But for today, we're going to cover our list here of the top 8 running backs on the PFF big board. Actually, that did change a little bit. Trevor may have been tinkering recently as well, and because there's a slight change in that ranking for on the big board if you check it compared to what we're talking about today, but that's okay. But then we're going to rank them based on our personal preference and see if that translates to fantasy or not once the dust settles on the NFL draft. If you are watching on the YouTubes, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'd also greatly appreciate that support if you're willing, and it helps us a ton as well. But yeah, if you're enjoying the rookie content, we are going to keep it rolling here. And before we do that, I do want to just remind everybody to check out the PFF Mock Draft Simulator if you haven't already. It's where you can take control and draft for your favorite team or draft for the entire league, whatever you want. Again, you can make trades. You can do your own mocks with just one team. You can draft for every single team, however you like to do it. We are in draft month right now, so there's no better time to dive in and start putting some mocks together. You can use promo code 30MDS right now on pff.com to get 30% off annual subscriptions, which includes all of our NFL draft content and, of course, access to the best mock draft simulator in the league here at PFF. So check it out now and go have yourself some fun. Again, that is promo code 30MDS. All right, Kate, let's get her going here, and we'll start right at the top of the PFF big board with a man that nobody was really aware of last year because he was kind of buried on a depth chart that included Roshan Johnson and some guy named Bijan Robinson. It's Texas's Jonathon Brooks who burst onto the scene this year as a one-year starter. Kate, tell us about Mr. Brooks there out of Texas.
Jonathon Brooks really probably is the one prospect that I could have pictured maybe sneaking into the late first round here. Unfortunately, as soon as he got that full-time role after playing behind Bijan, behind Roshan, finally got that lead role as a lead back. Fortunately, tore his ACL in early November, but what you're looking at with Jonathon Brooks, and hopefully the fact that he is young amidst suffering that torn ACL, is going to give him a nice and speedy recovery. You're looking at a guy with fresh legs, 238 rush attempts to his name throughout college. So, like, you're getting as fresh legs as you could possibly muster. 6 foot tall, 216 pounds. He's got decent build, solid length. And boy, the advanced metrics for him, it really pop off the page. 3.91 yards after contact per attempt, that ranked in the 82nd percentile among running backs in 2023. 34% missed forced tackle rate, that ranked 30th among 585 qualifying running backs. 90.1 PFF rushing grade. He's smooth. He has got soft hands, capable as a receiver, capable as a route runner. Averaged 1.5 yards per route run in 2023. Not super experienced. So that might be a knock on Jonathon Brooks. But with the running back position in general, I do think that's kind of a give and a take, right? Like, not super experienced. So not necessarily going to be the most proficient at maybe reading blocks at times, reading the field. And I think he could use some, more vision at times. Not a huge problem for him, but if we're going to be picking and choosing here, but all of that's going to come with time. And with that lack of experience comes those fresh legs, as I mentioned. So Jonathon Brooks, overall, I think pretty much the consensus RB1, and that's about the only consensus pick we have in this class.
Yeah, it feels like he's been pretty consensus at the top of most people's boards right now. And I mean, I get it for sure. Like, again, even though it's a smaller sample with him as a one-year starter, like, you watch him, he's a strong runner. He's got good contact balance. He's able to fight through contact and keep his legs moving, which helps him push for those extra yards. And he's not easily stopped. He's difficult to slow down unless you're getting ideal contact on him as a defender. And that's where a lot of like Brooks's success came from, in delivering that additional yardage on top of what his team provided for him, right? Including that 95th percentile missed tackles forced per attempt, 0.34, and 87th percentile yards after contact per attempt, 4.1. So that's among prospects, running back prospects, since 2017 or 2018. He's got a good combination of great cuts and speed, where he's able to make moves, make defenders miss, and then not lose momentum or get slowed up, which, you just watch the game against Kansas, for example, this past year. If you want kind of the full showcase of that, he's pretty unreal in that one. But nice hands as a receiver too. Like, he wasn't overly involved as a receiver. I think 29 targets, 25 receptions, make some good catches in there on some slightly off target throws. But, like any running back, he's not without his drops either. But again, turns into a threat with the ball in his hands as a receiver as well. 0.48 missed tackles forced per reception, best mark in this year's class since 2022. And again, smaller sample size because he basically didn't play in 2022, but he makes up for it a little bit in 2023. So yeah, he'll be really interesting. His production profile, as well as the torn ACL, probably pushes him closer to the end of the second round, maybe early third if he really starts to fall. But as far as expected draft capital goes, but just one-year starter. But like you said, we understand why that is. He had a pretty difficult depth chart to overcome there in Texas for most of his career. But 21 years old, he's got ideal size for the NFL. He's capable of handling those short yardage and goal line opportunities. And like every single running back in this class, there's at least a chance that, he doesn't come right in and start day one specifically for him, it not being a guaranteed, like you said, just being relatively inexperienced. But, draft capital, landing spot, obviously just going to play a huge part for this entire class. And I think, his chances at least of contributing year one, maybe behind an established NFL starter, are pretty good, with a chance for maybe a true breakout in year two for him.
Yeah, and he's one of these guys that I think just a natural runner, really shifty. You love to see that shiftiness and agility, especially with the fact that like he also has the size to back it up. I think generally like a solid pass blocker, which is going to help him. I think find some snaps in terms of like a true 3 down role. And for me in this class, I don't know that there's a ton of guys that I think day one could come in, obviously health being the predominant factor for Brooks, but
Mhm.
there's not a ton of guys that I think coming in day one could step into a field healthy and take on a 3 down role. And for me, Brooks is kind of that guy. Like it, inexperience aside, I do think he is probably the most complete prospect in this class, but again, incomplete because of that questionable health, but by all accounts, I don't think we've heard really anything negative coming out about, his rehab process or anything like that. So overall pretty concerning. And we'll kind of see how that shakes out and if that has an impact on his overall draft stock, but doesn't really seem like that has been the narrative at this point.
Yeah, it sounds like, just like from hearing, about medicals through the combine and stuff like that, it seems like he's on track there to potentially be ready for the start of the year, which is a nice sign. And like you said, it's going to be tough for any of these guys to come in and be starters day one, especially with so many of the ideal running back landing spots basically being filled up in free agency with a lot of like established veterans and good NFL running backs. So there's not going to be a lot of great landing spots. I have a hard time imagining, more than a couple of these guys really being fantasy relevant year one. But Brooks at least has a decent chance of potentially being that guy here in 2024 if he's healthy.
Yeah, and I mean, even as far as landing spots go, there are still a few teams that have, I think, a relative glaring need, right?
Mhm.
Like Devin Singletary leading the backfield for the New York Giants. I
I like
can't.
Singletary, but yeah.
I like no, I like Singletary, but for
Yeah.
me, in terms of projecting him for like a 3 down workload, no
Yeah.
way. Like I don't necessarily know that he's going to be the guy that's going to carry a backfield. And the it the Giants have a ton of needs, but I
Mhm.
mean, the Raiders, like, I think could be an interesting landing spot. Obviously,
Mhm.
the Cowboys, who,
Cowboys, yeah.
I think it's their team doctor actually did Jonathon Brooks's ACL
Oh,
surgery. So little fun connection there. Like, I mean, if Jonathon Brooks lands in Dallas, let's
yeah.
say, which he's going to be presumably available here in the second round, that I think like in dynasty leagues bumps him up to like a top 12 dynasty running back right out of the gate. There are some like I know it feels like with the free agent market, there's not a ton of landing spots, but I do think there's a few good spots. I don't want to poo-poo it too hard.
No, there definitely is, right? Like Dallas, obviously being the big one. Like if he goes there, if he wasn't everybody's consensus number one back, he'd probably jump to that spot pretty quickly for fantasy purposes. And yeah, for what it's worth, like we're working through like our 7 round all analyst mock draft right now here at PFF, and John Owning, our wonderful editor here, is a big Dallas Cowboys fan. He's controlling the Cowboys, and even he took Jonathon Brooks in the 2nd round for the Dallas
Mhm.
Cowboys. So he's if he's willing to get behind it, I can imagine that yeah, a lot of us would be able to get behind that for sure. So it'll be interesting. I can't wait to see what happens there, because Dallas, they have to draft a running back. It's just it's going to be almost a guarantee. So we'll see if it's Brooks or not, but whoever it is, I think is going to get some fantasy love for sure. All right, let's keep things going with numero dos on the PFF big board out of Tennessee. It's Jaylen Wright, who had one of the better combines this year at the running back position, which included a 4.38 second 40 time. He finished with a 9.80 RAS, relative athletic score, that is. And look, this translates when you watch him on film as well, like and to his data. He was one of the better, has one of the better explosive run rates in this class at 19.3%. That's 85th percentile among running back prospects since 2018. He had 35 total runs of 10 plus yards in 2023, which was a top 20 mark among all FBS running backs last season. Handled at least 85 carries in each of his 3 seasons at Tennessee, totaling nearly 2,300 rushing yards to go along with 18 rushing touchdowns. Now, the touchdown total was down from 2022 when he had 10 to just 4 in 2023. But what's more encouraging is that he was able to deliver like a career year in terms of PFF rushing grade with a 91.2, as well as yards after contact per attempt at 4.35 and missed tackles forced per attempt at 0.32. So I like to see that. You watch him, he's quick, he's got quick feet, he's shifty in space. I really like his first step where he can bounce around in space, take off like a ricochet shot. Like that part I really liked, even when there are times where he's not necessarily following the lead blocker or taking the optimal path, which obviously isn't ideal, but he still makes some positive plays on those runs because of his ability to make those quicker cuts and bail himself out with speed and agility. But there's also times where that just doesn't work and can be frustrating at times for sure. And you'll probably hear or read quite a bit about, vision concerns for him. But I will say when he does it right, like he's showing patience, working behind pulling blockers and utilizing those blockers to help optimize that yardage gain. And he did have a decent amount of like gap scheme runs in Tennessee. So has a great feel for just kind of taking his time and allowing those holes to open up. Obviously has the breakaway speed that you look for as well. But, I've talked enough about him here for a second. What do you think about Jaylen Wright in Tennessee?
Jaylen Wright's a really interesting prospect. He's probably one of these guys that I move around in my rankings more than any of them, even despite the fact that he's up here towards the top. Now, what you like about him, obviously, you mentioned the 40-yard dash, ranked in the 95th percentile for the running back position with that 4.38, ranked 86th percentile or higher in vertical jump and broad jump, 40-yard dash. Like, he is an outstanding athlete, and that is what I think teams are going to be super excited about. He's got a thick build. He's a solid player. My concerns primarily lack in some of that lack of experience. He never fully took over that backfield. Never had more than 150 carries in a season, so not necessarily going to know if he's maybe physically capable of taking on that full workload. He's got so much burst. He's got a lot of breakaway run potential, ranked 5th among Power 5 running backs with 35 explosive plays. And I mean, all of that athletic testing, you saw it in every play on the field. But for me, the question marks don't so much come from like the athlete, because I think that's what you're drafting when you get a Jaylen Wright. But the questions more come as how it's going to translate to the next level. Can he carry a full 3-down workload? What's he going to look like in an offense that's not the Tennessee Volunteers? That offense has generally been kind of wide open. He faced a stacked box on just 4 of 138 runs last year. Like, what is it going to look like when he is on a NFL style offense that isn't so wide open? Is that going to translate? So a lot of my question marks for him don't necessarily come from him itself. It just comes with what he was asked to do at Tennessee and how well that's going to project moving forward. And those are my biggest points of hesitancy. But like, when he was asked to step up, he did everything that you possibly could have asked for. So Jaylen Wright, again, while I'm super excited about him, more question marks than you'd probably guess based on his profile, I think. And so much of that just comes down to how he's going to project. But there's no doubt that he has some of the best athletic traits among all of these, prospects, that if it is going to translate, then they're going to get a solid value here, projected in round 2 of the NFL draft. I think really an interesting guy.
He is, right? Like, and I'm right there with you as far as like there being flashes of his ability to potentially be that kind of 3-down back, but it's inconsistent, right? And it's not a large sample size necessarily as far as him as being like a true starter for college football. But along with the common theme of not always seeing the right holes, which I think potentially could be something that's coached as well, especially for a player that
Yeah.
has decent patience that like he does. But the main thing is going to be that explosiveness, right? Like that's going to be that athleticism is going to be the thing that draws the eyes of NFL coaches and teams, and makes him a desirable asset here and somebody to kind of work with and mold into an NFL player. But he's, yeah, like you said, not quite there just yet. Just one real season two of being utilized as a receiving back, which was this past year. I did think he did a nice job kind of holding his own in that air raid type style system there in Tennessee. And there's potential there too, like to carve himself out a role as a receiver in the NFL at some point as well, which could be encouraging for fantasy purposes. But again, like you've been saying, I'm with you. I don't think he's quite there just yet, but there's definitely potential, which is why I think he is ranked as highly as he is on the big board for sure.
And even for some of those concerns about maybe like the field vision, I do think that again, stemming from that might just be some of that lack of experience, which again, like he never really took over that in the offense at Tennessee. He split the workload, was super efficient when asked to step in, of course, but like generally speaking, I think that that's something that field vision does come with time and probably a little bit hard to develop when you're not getting those carries as consistently. You had Dylan Sampson come in a reprieve role, Jabari Small, like there was a rotation that I think if he gets the opportunity to be a team's true lead back with a full workload, I think that those things could come with time.
Yeah. Nope, I'm absolutely with you there. All right, before we keep moving on through these running backs, I do want to give a shout out to our presenting sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life. If you have a family, then you need to get term life insurance to protect them. It's one of the smartest financial decisions you can make, and the start of the new year is the perfect time to get it done, so you could focus on whatever else the year has in store for you. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy, meetfabric.com/fantasy. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Insurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Okay, let's move to a national champion out of Michigan. Will he, won't he follow Jim Harbaugh to the Los Angeles Chargers? Time will tell. But Kate, tell us about Blake Corum.
Blake Corum has been one of the most productive running backs over the past 2 seasons. He's a capable workhorse, fourth-year player out of Michigan. A little bit on the smaller side than you would generally like for the running back position. He's just under 5'8", 5th percentile for height, 205 pounds, 25th percentile, incredibly short arms, just under 29 inches. That ranks 3rd percentile for running backs. Projected to go here in the 2nd to 3rd round. He is like an absolute bowling ball on the field. I mean, you look at what he was asked to do. He was asked to truly carry that Michigan offense, and he was the pinnacle of the offense. We talked a little bit about like JJ McCarthy and questions about him coming out. Like the reason why we didn't necessarily get to see JJ McCarthy in some of these big time situations is because Blake Corum was carrying the load. The rushing grade, every like advanced metric you could look at, outside of probably like yards per carry, average just 5.5 yards per carry over the course of his career, which again, I'll say I'm not overly concerned about just because of the type of role that he was asked to carry at Michigan. This was a true NFL style offense that relied very heavily on the run and was built around the run. So not so concerned about the fact that that yards per carry average might be, a bit below some of the other top prospects. Um, you know, not not a lot to dislike about Blake Corum. Maybe coming out the biggest knocks, like again, can probably be size. has a little bit more miles on the tires than most of these other top prospects. 675 career carries there at Michigan. But what you like to see is that he is capable of taking those full workloads, 250 plus touches out of each of the past 2 seasons. Um, there's just not a lot to dislike about Blake Corum.
Yeah, like you look at the rushing grades. I mean, elite rushing grades throughout his collegiate career. Like despite or sorry, not despite, but delivering the best single season PFF rushing grade, 96.2 among prospects since 2018. Though doing so in 2022 as opposed to like his final college year, which is fine. Corum's strong overall rushing grade too. Like it translates to facing stacked boxes. Like you said, he's shorter, but he's got a decent build, like as far as being thick, with him being able to kind of push through and be used in those short distance situations, goal line situations. As a 3-year starter at Michigan too, his lowest PFF rushing grade came this past season, 83.1. So didn't quite reach the heights he did in 2022 across the board for his rushing metrics. So that was one of the concerns there, but he also scored 27 rushing touchdowns in 2023, which led the entire FBS. He has 58 total rushing touchdowns for his career. It is worth noting that 22 of those 27 touchdowns in 2023, and then 42 of his 58 career rushing touchdowns came in goal-to-go situations, which is a significant credit to his team and providing that many opportunities for him to get into those high percentile scoring positions. But he's still got to finish, and he definitely did. So it shines some, light on his explosive run rate as well, which ranked among the bottom 5 in this year's class and 12th percentile since 2018. He had a 4.53 second 40 time, not great long speed, but with his rushing grades, I think you can still expect him to be like a net positive as a runner on a play-to-play basis, just perhaps without like that true kind of game breaking potential, right? Where he's just every time he touches the ball, he's going to get you make it a positive play, right? But not necessarily win you your fantasy matchups unless he's landing in a volume heavy situation that's allowing him to touch the ball a ton, like he did there in Michigan. Because yeah, he like you said, he's a fluid runner, he's a physical runner. He's not necessarily getting a ton of extra yardage after contact, which, is a little bit of a concern for me. At least in 2023, he was much better in this regard in 2021 and 2022. So not sure what happened there exactly, but the 2.9 yards after contact per attempt since 2022 is 24th in this class. But there's a lot to like here from him overall. Likely going to be probably late day 2 prospect, maybe. Obviously landing spot dependent, who isn't, but certainly capable of being fantasy relevant, like I said, on a number of teams, especially if they view him as an every down player, which I don't know if he's there yet. I don't know if I'd be trusting him in an every down role yet, but could definitely develop into that role if needed. I think he's just going to be a reliable back that will get you what you need him to get, and probably not a whole lot on top of that, which could work out fine again for fantasy if that volume is there.
Yeah, I mean, if he lands here with the LA Chargers, which it just feels like too natural. I mean, it just feels like it's going to happen. Uh, it's over. Like he's going to be an immediate fantasy asset. Now, like I do think, interestingly, like despite the lack of yards after contact per attempt, like has a lot of lower body strength that like can withstand contact, just maybe not as consistently as you'd like, but lots of lower body strength. And another thing that I want to highlight is I think he probably reads the field better than any running back in this draft class. I think he knows how to utilize blockers, which is an underrated skill. Something like think
Mhm.
of him as the opposite of a Jaylen Wright. Doesn't have necessarily that size and athletic profile, but has that experience, field vision that I think NFL teams are going to be enamored with, despite the fact that, he's not going to be a guy that is a top end speedster. I think he wins in a lot of different ways, whether that be with that field vision, whether it be correctly utilizing blocking schemes. Like I think from a mental standpoint, he's got a huge edge over most of the running backs in this class, and that's going to count for a lot.
Yeah, no, I do. I think there's definitely potential for him to be effective at the NFL level because of all of that, like you said. And I mean, the Chargers would be a fun landing spot, right? As easy as of picking as that is, like having last year's NFL goal line merchant in Gus Edwards, and then the NCAA goal line merchant in Blake Corum going head to head in a steel cage match for those touches in 2024 could be a lot of fun as well. So yeah, I like it. But yeah, Corum really interesting. I've seen him as the top running back on some people's lists. I've seen him, outside of the top 5 as well. Like you said, just kind of speaks to that lack of consensus around this year's class, but a fun player with definitely some potential. So another fun one here to talk about. It's a little guy out of Oregon at 5'9", 192 pounds. But when I ran all of Bucky Irving's career numbers through my production model, like he was the top performer from this 2024 class. And that starts by delivering one of the best missed tackle force per attempt rate in the PFF era. Among running backs with at least 300 carries, Irving ranks 4th all time in missed tackles forced per attempt behind Bijan Robinson, Javonte Williams, and one more name from this class who we'll talk about shortly. But 0.36 missed tackles forced per attempt. That's 96th percentile since 2018 without the workload qualifier. I thought for this guy, like he did an excellent job at creating yards above expectations, despite being one of the smaller running backs in this year's class. Like an 85.2 rushing grade versus a stacked box is 91st percentile among prospects since 2018. For a guy that small, I'd love to see something like that. He's got light feet. He's got great speed to find and create openings in run lanes. He's looking to avoid contact, which is smart considering his size. And that's part of what makes him good at breaking tackles as well, is he's shifting his momentum away from defenders as opposed to leaning into them. He's got great lateral movement with those jump cuts. That's where a lot of those forced missed tackles come from. And just shifty in the open field, bounces around side to side, often off of defenders and able to create plenty of that bonus yardage. And, the sticking point, I think, when it comes to the NFL and the draft is going to come down to size and athleticism as well. But okay, where are you at with Bucky Irving?
Bucky Irving is one of the more interesting guys because I think, like, on tape, statistically, you're not going to have as many problems. I think, honestly, the biggest problems that you see in Bucky Irving as a prospect, generally speaking, are going to come with concerns from that athleticism and from size. Now, that's not to say that, like, small running backs can't succeed in the NFL. I think we're seeing year over year that size is becoming less of a concern and less of an issue for both NFL teams and in terms of fantasy football production. I mean, like, we just saw Tank Dell put up an unprecedented fantasy season considering his size. But like, it's really the athleticism paired with the size, right? Like at 5'9", 192 pounds, you want him to run uh, a better 40 than a 4.55 40-yard dash. Like that, that's a little bit concerning. But like the production profile, I mean, I don't know what more you could really ask. I think fantasy managers are going to like a lot that he is a very productive receiver. 692 receiving yards over the past 2 seasons combined, ranks 7th among running backs. Over the past 2 seasons, averaged 6.6 yards per attempt. Like that 96.1 PFF rushing grade. The player that you see on the field, I don't think leads to a lot of concerns. I think it's more of these question marks about his overall stature and where he measured in 29.5-inch vertical. That ranks 4th percentile for running backs, by the way. It's very interesting because a lot of his athletic testing, I don't think necessarily show some concern. Like, you don't necessarily see all the same concerns on tape. But hopefully those abilities to maneuver and read the field, avoid some hits, maybe that will translate. But I think what fantasy managers are definitely going to be most excited about is, his vision, the overall kind of quickness, and most importantly, that receiving ability, because we know that full PPR formats, Bucky Irving could be an absolute cheat code. It's just a question of whether or not he has the purest skill set in this class. And I don't think he does, but like maybe a guy like Jaylen Wright, who's a overall better athlete but less experienced. Like, I think with Bucky Irving, it's going to be a matter of, do you want to chase upside, or do you want to have a really solid running back? So I think wherever Bucky Irving lands, like, you could be getting a huge value, but I don't necessarily see, top 12 upside in his future.
It's hard to envision it, right? Especially again with the size concerns and with that athletic profile. Like that was shocking. I think that combine from him, like it just, like you said, it just doesn't match up to what he put on the field,
Yes.
and it's weird. Like I'd like it to come out that maybe he had like a stomach bug or something during the combine, but there hasn't been anything
Me too,
since
man.
then. Yeah, because I really like him. Like I put like watching him. He was one of the first running backs I watched from this year's class, and I loved what I saw. I mean, everything like 95.3 career rushing grade is 93rd percentile since 2018. The best single season rushing grade, a 93.4 is 94th percentile. Explosive run rate 18.5%, 82nd percentile. And like you said, utilized quite a bit as a receiver in 2023. He was targeted 61 times, came up with 55 receptions, 1.39 yards per route run for his career. That's 75th percentile among those running back prospects. He's got a good target per route run rate at 0.19, is 82nd percentile. But like we've been saying, the main weaknesses for him, they're not going to be found in his production profile, but more just that size and athleticism are going to be the biggest question marks. Like 2.16 RAS is brutal, obviously, right? It's the biggest concern, I think, when you look at those small handful of backs with similar numbers from as far as 40 time goes and athletic scoring, very few of them emerge as fantasy relevant, and that should be considered a stretch as far as fantasy relevancy goes, because out of 16 sub 200-pound running backs to run 4.5 or worse, only 4 players, including Jeff Wilson, Salvin Ahmed, and Myles Gaskin, delivered double-digit fantasy points per game in a season, and those were all on very small sample size. The only other running back to fit that criteria since 2018 is Kyron Williams, who was the fantasy
Ooh.
RB2 last year in points per game, and obviously going to be the most optimistic of outcomes. But if you're a truther of Bucky Irving, you could use Kyron Williams as an example. You could point to smaller running backs having success in the NFL as recently as last year, and Devin Achane and Keaton Mitchell, guys like that. But it is still undoubtedly a concern, right? As far as size and athleticism goes.
I will say there's one comp that I saw, Dane Brugler's released his comps today, and he mentioned
Mm.
uh, Michael Carter as a potential comp for Bucky Irving, and now I can't unsee it.
Oh,
In terms of like overall size, like production profile, how that translated to the NFL, I do think that that's a realistic kind of outcome for Bucky Irving, which that's probably going to scare me more than most. You know, maybe I have like a little bit of PTSD because I loved Michael Carter coming out so much, but now I can't unsee it. And I do think that that's kind of an interesting comp, because it's a very recent one that I think we
mhm.
saw flashes in the pan when he was on an NFL field, but didn't translate to longevity in the NFL,
Right.
which um, again, kind of a concern, but a very wide range of outcomes here on the table for Bucky Irving.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good call. Damn, that is a good comp for sure. It makes sense here for
Right?
Bucky
You can't
Irving, but
unsee it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
it's a
Shout
good
out
one.
Dane Brugler.
Yeah. Shout out Dane Brugler and the Beast, which came out today, I think, right? Like you said. So yeah. All right. Let's go to another interesting name here in this year's class, Kate. It is Trey Benson out of FSU. What were your thoughts on Mr. Trey Benson?
I really like Trey Benson, and I honestly, like, wasn't necessarily expecting to like Trey Benson as much as I did.
Nice.
21 years old, redshirted in his freshman year at Oregon, 2021, ended up transferring to Florida State in 2022 and had back-to-back seasons, working in that Seminoles offense. He's a big boy, just over 6 foot, 216 pounds, ran a 4.39 40-yard dash, which I think really helped that potential draft capital there at 92nd percentile for running backs. Solid, just all around player. Now, some things worth noting: suffered a major knee injury in the 2021 season at Oregon. So he does have that history there. And it was an ACL, MCL, a lateral and medial meniscus tears in his right knee. So a bit of a significant portion in his health history, but generally speaking, I mean, average 6.1 yards per attempt here in his course at FSU. Just a really solid, explosive, tough, and violent runner. And I think that that's sort of like hashtag my type when it comes to NFL running backs. I love to see that violent running style, which in some regards can be a huge positive. Obviously, when you're looking at yards after contact per attempt, ranked in the 63rd percentile this year. Missed forced tackles per attempt, 87th percentile this season among running backs. Just under a 30% missed forced tackle rate, but just a lot of burst to his game, and kind of has that you know ideal athletic profile I think that you're looking for at the running back position in terms of physicality and upside. Now, obviously, the other big concern for him is like, unlike Bucky Irving, Trey Benson doesn't have that same production profile to his name. 25% dominator rating, ranks in the 53rd percentile. That's average. Capable pass catcher, not like a
Mhm.
stone cold pass catcher, but like has youth, has size. I think there's a lot to like about Trey Benson in terms of just, being one of the more well-rounded prospects. I think he's, not the most solid or most experienced guy in terms of pass protection, but like graded out 75.4 PFF pass blocking grade this season when asked to do so. That ranked 18th among running backs in this draft class. I think I I'm kind of enamored with Trey Benson. Lots of splash play potential. I love the athlete. Um, I like a lot of things about Trey Benson.
I think we're gonna align here a little bit when we finally do our rankings, because I'm with you. I love Trey Benson. Like he comes in with some impressive rushing metrics coming out of college. Like I said, it's not like amazing by any means, but like really impressive nonetheless. And that includes, like when I mentioned before, Bucky Irving being in that list with Bijan Robinson, Javonte Williams in missed tackles forced per attempt. He has the best mark among running backs with 300 carries, at least 300 carries since 2014 when PFF first started grading college, in missed tackles forced per attempt at 0.39. So he is number one on that list, and also ranked 90th percentile in rushing grade versus a stacked box, 86th percentile as far as his best single season rushing grade, which was a 91.4 in 2022. And like he performed really well at the combine, a 4.39 40 time at an ideal 216 pounds for the NFL. Like there's still a lot to like, I think, about Trey Benson. Like he's currently tracking just outside the top 100 according to the PFF mock draft simulator, but his testing numbers and overall production profile, I think, are comparable to backs going in that second to third round range. So I think he's gonna most likely go day 2. I have a feeling, and that's kind of where I'm hoping he goes. Didn't have really any significant downfalls in his key college data outside of that dominator rating, like you said. With surprisingly, like, explosive run rate was one of the areas where he was relatively lower compared to the rest of his data, where he only ranked in the 72nd percentile for that
Boo.
category, right? Which shouldn't even be highlighted as a weakness at this point, especially considering he ran that 4.3940 time. But there's a lot to like. Strong efficiency profile, excellent athletic profile, just 21 years old right now, ideal size, great strength running the ball. Improved his stock as a potential receiving back as well, like you said, this past year, as far as an efficiency and yards per route run standpoint, as well as just getting more work in that regard compared to 2022. So he definitely has my attention as someone I could see myself falling in love with even more with day 2 capital and a nice landing spot. Probably one of the running backs I'm most excited about in this year's class. So I'm holding out hope there for a good draft.
Yeah, I think really the biggest kind of concern for me with Trey Benson just kind of comes from that 2022 and 2023 season didn't really see a huge growth in terms of role. It started a few more games, but didn't necessarily translate to much higher production. Overall less efficient season, did score more touchdowns, but I mean, year over year, generally speaking, I think you expect to see a little bit more overall growth. And his back-to-back seasons, 2022 and 2023, were like nearly identical outside of touchdown production. So I think that's really the question. Why didn't we see, more of that growth here? And why did we never see him take on more than 160 carries in a season? But generally speaking, I like if that's the biggest knock that I can come up with, like from a tape perspective, from an advanced metrics perspective, like, one of the more complete profiles I think that we're going to see in this running back class.
Yeah, I am with you absolutely. All right, next up, out of Kentucky, it's Ray Davis, the 6th ranked running back on the PFF big board,
I think you
who
mean Ray Davis, old man Ray Davis, right? Are we going to talk about, like, I feel like we have to introduce him as the 24-year-old who's turning 25 in November,
oh
right?
my god. Yeah, yeah,
That's how
he's
we have
gonna
to start off this prospect profile. No, let's not cut around it, John.
fair, fair. Yeah, he's coming out onto the field with a cane and a walker, to try and rack up some yards per carry. But old man Ray Davis, look, start with the positives for him. He's built a pretty solid body of work, right? Like, during his collegiate career across 3 separate programs since 2019, including Temple, Vanderbilt, and then finally Kentucky. Look, he's on the older side. He's 24 years old. He's going to be 24 years old in his NFL rookie season. I thought he's at least done a nice job kind of developing during his college days, including improving upon his 2022 numbers with a career year across the board in his first season with the Wildcats. Delivered a 91.4 rushing grade in 2023 to go along with 1,131 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns. His consistency as a runner, delivering strong rushing grades in nearly all 5 of his college seasons, is a standout for him. Especially considering that his offensive lines after leaving Temple failed to crack even the top 95 run blocking units in the FBS in any of the past 3 seasons. So as a result, Davis had the 3rd lowest percentage of his career rushing yards come before contact at 30.9% among this year's class. And he also had the 2nd lowest yards before contact, per attempt at 1.5, making, the strong production a little bit more impressive, right? And that did lead to Davis setting a new career high in yards after contact per attempt at 3.81, which almost a necessity for success in his college career, as he was getting, he wasn't getting the help from his run blocking unit or his peers that some of his peers were. And it's not like, yards after contact was a particular strength for him during his college career. I think he ranks below the 50th percentile prospects since 2018 in that regard, but it was at least encouraging to see him kind of greatly improve that number in 2023 alone. Explosive run rate for him, 12.7%, is among the lowest in both this year's class and among the prospect pool since 2018. Again, didn't get much help from his run blocking units over the years, and he isn't going to win with speed a lot of the time, but that is an area where he's at least slightly improved despite not getting as many free runs as some of his peers. But yeah, what did you think about old man Ray here?
I mean, he's like undoubtedly like the production profile. I mean, it speaks for itself, right? There's not a ton of questions in that regard. He's a smaller running back with a lot of experience. Obviously, he's got the age. Those are all probably the biggest concerns for me. It's really hard to generally evaluate a guy that coming out is going to be, 3 to 4 years the senior of some of the other guys, which obviously when you have an older running back, sometimes that can skew the production profile a little bit because you're going up against 18, 19, and 20-year-olds as a grown man with a 23, 24-year-old body, right? You're just built different at that point in your life than you are as a 20-year-old prospect, right? So like from that perspective, I'm kind of out on Ray Davis from fantasy. Big spoiler, I guess, for the end of the show when we do our rankings. I love the story. We mentioned Dane Brugler's Beast, the Beast, his thing. He had a really nice write up on sort of his story as a prospect, and if you want to know like all about how he transferred and how that all came to be, it's a fascinating story. The kid's resilient and offers a lot to like in terms of his overall build. I think a very agile guy, a productive guy, but the age alone and even the miles on the tires, like coming out and having almost 800 career touches to this point, or 840 career touches to this point, like that's tough when you have a lot of really fresh legs. Like it,
Yeah.
I'm trying to be nicer. I'm trying
No,
to.
no, I get it. And yeah, like for a 5-year player, playing across 3 systems, like I like the production profile. He made it into the analytical sleepers article that I did because he has some strong data points behind him. But I'm with you in that, like, of the 8 that we're talking about today, I'll be the lowest on him. Obviously, spoilers again. But
It's just
like,
hard to. It's obviously you need context for
yeah,
all of this data, right? And
yep,
I think part of the context for Ray Davis is his age and in that that build, that kind of I mean I think that all turns into an account when we're looking at some of this advanced data because um yeah, an older guy and more experienced guy playing against maybe smaller, more comparatively underdeveloped
hmm
opponents, like that's going to help. So I again love Ray Davis the player, and I think he's going to be a really exciting asset for an NFL team, but I do have concerns that that's actually going to translate to the fantasy production that we'd ideally like coming into this draft cycle. But hey, if he gets a good landing spot, and a team sees him and looks at the age and they say, you know what, like Ray Davis, let's give him this rookie contract and run him into the ground, which is a terrible way to approach, but I think a realistic way that people, NFL GMs approach, like he could be interesting. He could
yeah.
be. I'm being a hater. I'm sorry. I'm being a hater.
But like you said, there's a path at least, right? Like,
Mhm.
even for an experienced player, like there's teams that might like that experience. They want somebody that has the experience running the ball and having the vision and knowing what to look for and how to gain yardage effectively on a play-to-play basis. And there's at least some, encouraging data points for him to potentially be someone that with better draft capital we could be more optimistic about, basically, right? But
Yeah,
right
like
now
he's
it's
he's got a
yeah.
lot of solid traits, right? He's got the build, I think, the lateral agility, smooth feet. Like I think there's a lot to like, and if he lands in the right spot, then Ray Davis might be the perfect running back that you're going to have on your roster, probably just for the length of his rookie contract. And
Right.
uh, yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
interesting.
And if that happens, I'm okay with that. Like, for even for dynasty, like if he's
Yeah.
just going to be a rookie contract contributor for me, like most of my running backs are, that's what they're going to be anyways. I'm trying to get rid of them after that, so I could be fine with that. All right, more fun running back prospects to talk about here. We'll turn our attention to MarShawn Lloyd out of USC. Kate, what did you think about MarShawn Lloyd?
MarShawn Lloyd's an interesting one. 23 years old, fourth year player, transferred to USC in 2023. Limited wear and tear, unlike Ray Davis. 291 career carries to his name. A little bit on the shorter side. He's just under 5'9", 14th percentile, but thick boy, 220 pounds. Um, Not a ton of length, small hands. Ran a 4.46 40-yard dash, but um, you know, very efficient in his final season here at USC, 7.1 yards per carry. Um, Again, one of these guys that like has a lot of solid traits, but didn't necessarily have the experience in taking over a collegiate offense. Like he was not the focal point for USC. 116 carries this year.
Yeah, it's a smaller workload for sure, but probably one of the more like explosive runners in this class as well. Like, I loved watching him run. Like, he runs like he's on skates in the way that he's able to kind of glide around defenders. He's
Especially
often
for that size, it's
yeah,
it's something.
it is. It's cool to watch, and like that part of it, like, kind of got me excited about him. Like, often, he takes his runs wide and to the sideline, which works for him because he has those smooth cuts and high end speed. But I would like to see him, take it up the middle a little bit more with that speed, and if it's there, and he's certainly capable of kind of housing it when he gets those opportunities. He has a career explosive run rate of 18.3%, which is 81st percentile among prospects since 2018, 93rd percentile career missed tackles forced per attempt as well, for him at 0.33. I was a little surprised to see kind of how little they used him as a receiving option. I think just the 18 targets in 2023, had 25 at South Carolina in 2022, but it's also kind of common for college football. But I could definitely envision him being used as a receiver, like in the NFL as well, and being effective in that role, like despite mostly not being involved as a receiver in college, if that makes sense. Like, he has potential there. He has good hands and route awareness combined with that speed. I think there's potential, especially for a guy, with decent athleticism and speed and burst and agility. I just, like I said, I love the way he moves out there. Again, his cutting, his ability to break guys' ankles like they were on ice without skates, it is very satisfying to watch. But yeah, the size is great. I could see him, being either an early down or receiving back, just depending on how teams want to use him. And I think there's a lot to like from his tape, and that matches up with what he kind of shows in some of his overall rushing metrics that we have for him. But I think there's definitely potential here with Lloyd, and one of the running backs in this class that I could see myself again getting more excited about with good draft capital. But there's concerns as well, right? There's vision concerns coming out of USC. It's definitely there when you watch him. Part of the reason why his career rushing grade it isn't close to even 50th percentile prospect since 2018. He's also had fumbling issues, 11 career fumbles, both as a runner
Yes.
and a receiver, right? Despite not being utilized all that often in the passing game. So interesting. I there's definitely like an excitement like watching him on tape and making those runs, and then you dig into it a little bit more, and you realize there's maybe a little bit more inconsistency there and still some kinks to work out. So yeah, that I'm kind of in between on MarShawn Lloyd. I go back and forth with him quite a bit.
Yeah, he's one of these guys that I like the overall tape, I think, a little bit better than
Mhm.
some of the advanced metrics that you're gonna see, a lot of bursts that I think you're gonna see on tape, which you love to see. I think he's a tough guy. He can be physical, has sort of that, I think a solid build for an NFL running back, like not a slight frame at all. There's a lot to like in terms of MarShawn Lloyd. I just wanna turn off my, like, statistical brain while I'm watching MarShawn Lloyd, because I think he's more enjoyable to watch when you know that, maybe the statistical profile isn't as flattering for him.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly where I'm at. Like, I don't know if he'll translate to like a 3 down starter in the NFL. Like, he definitely has flashes and a bit of an ability to do both, but whether an NFL team views him as that level of player, considering that role is becoming rarer in the NFL anyways, just
Yeah.
kind of has me tempering the excitement for him. Even though I really liked what I saw when I watched the tape, there's still like enough question marks to kind of push him down just a bit for me right now.
Yeah, and again, landing spot could be pretty, I think, huge in
Yeah.
terms of his overall value here at the next level, but certainly a guy that I'm not ruling out as a potential contributor.
Definitely. Okay, last one on this list. Another player that I'm actually pretty excited about as well. It's Audric Estime out of Notre Dame. So Estime, for me, when looking at his data, it consistently improved uh, during his 3-year college career, culminating in a top 3 PFF rushing grade for the entire FBS in 2023 at 94.0, 4.27 yards after contact per attempt in 2023, helped propel his career rate among the 85th percentile among running back prospects since 2018 as well. But where he truly stood out among the rest of this class and even among prospects of years past was his rushing grade versus an 8-man box, where he earned the best mark among all FBS running back prospects since 2018 with a 92.1 rushing grade against a stacked box. He's a bigger back, 221 pounds. He's thick, he's strong, he has the vision and ability to fight for extra yardage, which has really influenced his score in that category against stacked boxes. And I think should be viewed as kind of a key trait for him to translate to the NFL as well. As far as weaknesses go, he probably doesn't stand out as a potential 3 down back right now, in large part to him just not being utilized in that role nearly at all in college. But to be fair to Estime, like Notre Dame as a team rarely utilized its running backs in the passing game. With Estime, kind of he led the backfield with just 17 targets in 2023. He did catch all 26 of his career targets and earned a fine 72.1 PFF receiving grade in 2023. But profiles more as like a pass blocking option than a pass catching option on those downs right now. And even if that is an area that he'll have to improve in order to earn that role in the NFL, I still have faith that there's potentially, again, another guy that could start to see his role grow as a pass down back over time, right? Like he's going to have to improve as a pass blocker, but he's already started to show a little bit of signs of that, and he definitely has the strength for it to potentially hold up as well. So, yeah, I'm optimistic about Audric Estime. I'll be curious where you're at with him.
I'm extremely bullish on Audric
There we
Estime
go.
here. And did we address the elephant in the room? Did we talk about that 40-yard dash time? Because I do think that, like, if you covered up that 40-yard dash time, I think Audric Estime, which let's just ignore it, and pretend he never ran a 4.71 40-yard
Sure.
dash. Like, if we just covered that up and pretend it didn't happen, I do think that, like, Audric Estime would be listed among a lot of the other top competitors. I mean, he's got ideal size, an incredible production profile, 31.1 dominator rating that ranks 72nd percentile for running backs, 6.4 yards per carry that ranked in the 83rd percentile. Just such a tough runner. He is thick. He's like, just he can run downhill and with so much power. And I loved his tape so much. The stats back it up. Like, saw that year-over-year improvement from 2022 to 2023. In that full-time role, absolutely excelled. Like you said, not necessarily an experienced receiver, which also might hurt some of that draft stock, but not necessarily, because I don't think he's a capable receiver. I think he's a fine pass blocker. I think he's a patient runner, but just so violent with some of that extra contact and so tough as a runner. I think that, again, if we could just cover up that 40-yard dash time, if he had never run a 40-yard dash, I think we would be talking about him as a top 5 running back in this class. So you know what? I'm going to cover up the 40-yard dash and I'm going to rank him as a top 5 running back in this class. I just think from a skill perspective, just has so much strength, contact balance, can break tackles. I love everything about Audric Estime's game. And it's funny. There was another really slow running back that came out of Notre Dame with a great production profile. That was Kyron Williams. And I'm not saying he's Kyron Williams, but I'm saying, like, we've seen this mold before. And watching Audric Estime play football, I don't necessarily think that you don't see the explosive. Like, the 40-yard dash was awful. The vertical and broad jump, both ranked 85th percentile or above. 5% of his rush attempts went for first down or touchdowns in 2023. That was the 5th highest rate among Power 5 running backs. Ranked second in the Power 5 with 4.3 yards after contact per attempt this season. 30% missed forced tackle rate. Like, he is not a guy that wins with straight line speed, which is what the 40-yard dash demonstrates. He's a guy that wins by withstanding contact. He's a guy that wins, I think, in so many other ways that, like, who cares about his straight line speed? I don't care. I don't care.
And to be honest, like, we can cover up the combine a little bit if we really wanted to, and just use his pro day 40-yard dash because it was a 4.58, right? So he improved, which, who doesn't improve on their pro day, obviously, right? But there's ways to look around it. And look, like you said, he's a top 5 running back for me in this class as well. I know he's number 9 now on the PFF big board, but I'm with you. I'm optimistic, and there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. I think, like you said, like, career rushing grade 95.3 is 93rd percentile. Had one of the best single season rushing grades as well in the 98th percentile. Yards after contact per attempt for his entire career, 4.1, is 85th percentile. And surprisingly, his explosive run rate, 19.1%, is 84th percentile, right? Like, so there's a lot there that, says that he's more than, just this kind of plotter or anything like that.
Well,
if people are just looking at that 40 time, for example.
And I think, like, for what he lacks with the speed, like, again, winning in terms of yards after contact, and he wins with play strength, like that. I think that can contribute to some of these explosive runs, because he can withstand contact. He can, bounce off defenders, because he's just a tough runner. And I think that a lot of that, his play style compensates in a very big way for his lack of athleticism. And, like, outside of, the overall straight line speed, Estime is probably, again, one of these more complete running backs in this class that's going to fall down draft boards a little bit if teams buy into, the concerns about this 40-yard dash. And if it never happened, I don't think we'd be talking about him as our consensus eighth running back. And though that might impact his actual NFL draft stock, which, again, I wouldn't be surprised. I just think the player's too darn good.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. Like, you just get a
I
feeling
love
like
him.
this is, yeah, he's great. Like, this is the kind of players that I think like the teams are going to want to utilize near the goal line, where he can use his strength and that vision to punch in touchdowns basically anywhere in the red zone as well, which is just going to be a major key for his potential like future fantasy production if he gets those opportunities. So I think that's going to translate to him being a good candidate for like leading early down work in the NFL as well, like regardless of field position. And yeah, like I know, like not highly involved as a receiver in college, but like we said, didn't drop any of his targets either, and improved as a pass blocker in 2023. So, yeah, definitely optimistic about Audric Estime as
Turn on the
well.
tape,
So,
y'all. Like, if you haven't
yeah,
watched Audric Estime play, like, he's honestly, out of all the running backs in this class, probably one of my favorite
yeah,
players that I've watched. Just in evaluating the tape matches the advanced metrics, I think, to a T.
mhm,
And I love to see that sort of completeness in a profile for a prospect when the analytics and the film can be perfectly married. And I think Audric Estime is the perfect example of when the tape and the metrics just have this perfect marriage. And I don't know, probably going to be one of the most underdrafted, I think, potential fantasy assets in rookie drafts for dynasty fantasy football
mhm.
managers. So yeah, don't sleep on Estimate just because of that 4.71 40-yard dash, which
Nice.
we're just gonna politely ignore because it ranks in the 10th percentile for running backs.
Yeah, I'm changing it to the pro day number. I'm just going to
Yeah.
use that. Why
Yeah.
not?
I'm just
But
gonna
yes.
do the what's a bird box? I'm gonna bird box it, cover up my eyes,
There you go.
and um yeah, it just move on because Audric Estime coming
Yep.
to an NFL draft near you.
There you go. Love it. Well said. All right, Kate, let's go into the rankings now. And how do you want to do this? Do you want to give each of our top four here and then do the later four, or start with the bottom four and then do the top four? Let's start with the bottom four. I asked you and then I
Hmm.
answered that. That's rude, but uh,
All right.
let's count down. Let's count down.
Ray Davis
Yeah.
coming in hot at number 8. We I'm sorry, I already gave all my reasons.
I
He's
know.
old, he is productive, but, a guy that I find it hard to buy in, especially if you're in a dynasty format. You're gonna be drafting a 24-year-old running back who's gonna be, 28 by the time his rookie contract is like, that's a very tough pill to swallow, given the number of miles on the tires. How about you? Number 8, where are we at?
Yeah, Ray Davis for me as well. Like I like that there's flashes there, but there's enough concerns, especially the age, to keep me from being overly optimistic about him at this point, especially as far as being like a three down running back. And honestly, that like this bottom four here of the or bottom eight, I guess, or whatever, bottom half of the top eight, when I finally get my marble mouth to work, is kind of where I'm at with everybody in this 4 5 to 8 range is just concerns about being three down running backs basically. But there's definitely reason to like a lot of these guys. So I'm with you. I have Ray Davis at 8. And then at number 7, this might be spicy because he's number 2 on the PFF big board. I have Jaylen Wright at Tennessee as number 7 for me. So I'm a little bit lower on him for sure. But
Wow.
we kind of talked about it. Like the flashes are there. I think there's potential, obviously, with landing spot and draft capital, but I just came away liking some of these other guys slightly more.
I do think that there are a lot of valid points of concern with Jalen Wright. I do think that draft capital is probably gonna be Jalen Wright's best friend, projected to go in the
Mhm.
2nd round right now. And if he has that 2nd round draft capital, I think that is going to give him an edge
Yeah.
that's gonna force you to move him up from RB7.
Mhm.
My RB7, I also don't know if this is spicy or not for fantasy. Bucky Irving out of
Okay.
Oregon, who again we mentioned like one of these guys that a very productive receiver, which I think people are going to be really excited about. But generally speaking, I think lacks some of the potential upside that I see in some of these other rookie running backs. That again, landing spot could absolutely shake this up in a really big way.
No, for sure. Like everybody here outside of this top 4, like, with great landing spot and great draft capital, I'm definitely willing to move them up, right? Like, this is just kinda how I'm looking at them here pre-draft and with those kinds of things aside. So I'm higher on Bucky Irving too, or higher on him than you, but he's within this back half of the top 8 for me as well. But, who did you have at number 6?
I'm gonna go with MarShawn Lloyd out
Yeah.
of USC, who, again, we talked a lot about some of the exciting traits, never took over in offense, but um, just a fun overall player to watch that I think could be in for an interesting role pending landing spot. But again, not necessarily the standouts that I have in like 1 through 5.
Right. I have, Marshawn Lloyd as 6 as well. So, yeah,
Perfect.
not too much to dive into there, but, Bucky Irving, I have at number 5.
Okay. Not
Yeah,
that different. Yeah.
yeah, it's not that different. Like, I mean, obviously, size and athleticism concerns there, but that aside, like, I love Bucky Irving. Like, if not for those red flags, he'd probably be much higher on this list for me. But I'm kind
Is
of a
it
believer
the
in him.
production profile that gives Irving the edge over Lloyd?
Yeah, production
'Cause for me,
profile.
I give Lloyd the edge in terms of, like, traits,
Okay.
and maybe that's where I'm valuing him higher. Is that, Bucky Irving, what gives him the edge over Lloyd for you?
Yeah, it's production profile, and honestly, like, watching the tape, like, I like both of those guys a lot, and that's why I have them over Jaylen Wright. Like, I just like their tape more than I liked Jaylen Wright's as well. But I think he can bring that explosiveness and that kind of big play upside to the NFL, right? Where he can have value as kind of like this high upside fantasy play on a weekly basis, obviously in the right situation. But um yeah, not as confident in him as like a 3 down back or anything like that, which is again kind of the separating factor for me in this first half of the top 8 versus the back half basically. So, yeah, I like the big play upside really for Bucky Irving, and it's there for Lloyd as well, but they're super close.
You mentioned Jaylen Wright. Jaylen Wright is who I have at 5, which I've tinkered with Jaylen Wright anywhere between 3 and 5, but, and again, the draft capital could have a really big impact on Wright's overall ranking as well as landing spot. But when I'm looking at the prospects coming out and not necessarily just the athleticism, not necessarily just the projected draft capital, I have 4 running backs on this list that I think are better overall running backs than Jaylen Wright, even if they're not the same type of athlete.
Yeah, and that means we got the same 4 running backs, in
Mm.
that top 4, so it's just a matter of what order, we're gonna put them in here. So at number 4,
Give me your order 1 through 4 here.
1 through 4? Okay, so, number 1 for me is Trey Benson out of Florida
Mm.
State. He is my number 1 running back. Number 2 is Jonathon Brooks. 3 is Audric Estime. 4 is Blake Corum. So Trey Benson, obviously, like, I'm in love with just kind of his overall profile, both production wise. The missed forced tackles per attempt obviously is juicy as hell, and great with the ball in his hands. Great rushing grades. He's athletically and speed wise, like, he's phenomenal. Ideal size. He's not a total dud as a receiver. He's 21 years old. Like, give me all of that for my RB1. And Brooks, like, he's super close. Like, I went back and forth between these two guys. Like, for all the reasons that I like Benson, I like Brooks, though. He's not maybe nearly as effective against stacked boxes. Also, less of a sample size with just the 1 year. Really, there's the torn ACL you could factor in there, but I definitely get why he'd be a lot of people's RB1 as well.
I think we
Estimate,
need a
yeah,
quote graphic, by the way, to our social team. Not a total dud as a receiver.
there
Like,
you go. That's a good,
can we
yeah,
just get that on a quote graphic? Because I think that's like the winning quote of this
yeah.
entire episode. Not that's every running back's goal is to just not be a total dud. Like I love
Exactly,
that.
right? Like, just get all the people excited with a quote, as electric as that. But yeah, like, those are my top 2, and then, like, it's close within that range as well for me. Like, Estimate, maybe that's maybe the most controversial one on here, but we both have him inside the top 5. So,
I have Brooks number 1. I
yeah,
just I like the overall player, and honestly, I think you could make a very good case for Trey Benson number one in this class, especially like if you're using the ACL tear as a tiebreaker, and a potential slow start for Brooks. Um, Benson could be off to a stronger start out of the gate. But I also have Estime at 3 and Blake Corum at 4. So we are very
Wow.
well aligned here. And I think Estime at 3 is probably going to be one of the spiciest takes you're going to see from PFF Fantasy all of this offseason because, again, I think people get their eclipse glasses on when they see these combine numbers and
Mhm.
the athletic testing, and the tape just tells such a different story for
Yeah.
Audric Estime. I struggled to find things that I didn't like about his game, and I'm really just I'm rooting for this kid. I think very, very bright future here in the NFL as long as people can get over that 4.71.
Yeah, get over the 4.71. We don't care. We were going with 4.58.
I
But
need that
yeah,
I need that on a t-shirt too. I need
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Who gives a hell about 4.71?
yeah.
But yeah, I really hope this works out because look, like you said, it might be the most controversial one on here that we both have him at 3, which is pretty funny. He's outside of most people's top 5 from what I've seen, but fell in love with the size, the production profile quite a bit. Obviously, like 100 percentile against stack boxes. Feeling pretty confident that he'll get some strong goal line opportunities in the NFL as well. Which, with everything else, just really nice profile, career rushing grade, all that kind of stuff. Decent explosiveness. Then he'll get credit for again because of that 40 time. Um, but yeah, the Corum and Estime were close for me. I know a lot of people like Blake Corum as well, but there are just a bit more red flags in his profile, just with that lack of explosive play rate and being pretty mid in at best in terms of missed tackles forced per attempt and yards after contact per attempt. But I do think he'll get better draft capital for this class that, does that and he does a good enough job too at least creating those positive runs that he'll probably translate to the NFL as well, and coaches will like that. So it just probably lacks that big play upside. So that was kind of the deciding factors on 3 and 4 for me as well.
I have a feeling that the draft landing spots are going to shake up
Yeah.
these
Oh
rankings a
yeah.
ton, but this was a really fun exercise, and I want to hear everybody on social totally roast us for having Audric Estime at RB3. Let us know where you have him because,
Yeah.
like, if I went into this show without kind of having a idea of where people were ranking these, I would assume that Estime was a lot higher, and I'm gonna say to hell with consensus. Audric Estime, RB3.
There you go. There you go. Beckett, make a nice quote graphic. Audric Estime wearing like a bronze medal on a podium or something like that.
Yes.
And yeah, me and Kate cheering him on as RB3 in this class. But yeah, that's gonna do it. This was definitely fun. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Next week we're gonna continue the NFL draft content. I know we have only tight ends left as far as offensive positions go, but we're gonna talk some tight ends, probably mostly Brock Bowers, and spin that into a few other ways to look at this year's rookie class as we get ready for the draft. But Kate, as always, thank you for lending your expertise and talking prospects with me here. Always a good time, and I look forward to doing it again. So please remind everybody where they can find more of you and your work.
Yeah, give me a follow on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. That's Kate, KateMagdziuk. Talking all things fantasy football all the time, covering the Steelers for Behind the Steel Curtain and floating around the interwebs. So check me out.
Sounds good. And yeah, if you're looking for more NFL draft talk on the defensive side of the ball, whether you're into IDP or just want to know more about the defensive prospects, we'll have another episode later in this week talking rookie defensive backs, which is going to be fun and interesting based on that group this year. We got my guy, John Glosser from Dynasty Nerds coming on. So check that out as well. Also, check out the PFF draft guide is out now. You could use promo code 30MDS for 30% off an annual subscription. I have plenty of draft content up on the site as well if you're into it. I've covered the analytical strengths and weaknesses of the quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, and running back classes, as well as some of the analytical sleepers using the same production model at wide receiver and running back. We wrote up the personnel adjusted yards per route run article for wide receivers. I used Scott Barrett's yards per target over expected model to kind of shine a light on this year's wide receiver and tight end classes as well. And then started my positional rankings with the quarterback class coming out this week too. So yeah, in case you couldn't tell, it's draft season. So stay locked in. We will continue to keep you covered here on the PFF Fantasy Podcast and on PFF.com. And until next time, peace.